That's what they've been working on for 70 years, and I heard the lead-in, so you may appreciate this. When back in 1945, the leader of the group, Abraham Berady, I believe coined this phrase. I believe he may have been the first one to use it, although I think you'll know if I'm wrong. He said, there's a coming new world order. And he says, we're entering into world... 1945, that is documented in their archives, which anyone can
I don't think he coined it, but the fact that he used it, Hitler used it. Hitler used it. H.G. Wells wrote a book called The New World Order.
Okay, so it predates him, yeah. I mean, he was an interesting admirer of Hitler. Basically, they said, they said, you know, what we're aiming for is a form of totalitarianism. They said, how about a fascist dictatorship for Christ?
No, Hitler is one of the earliest. You can't find, right around the same time, Hitler starts using it, then H.G. Wells uses it, but they both wanted different forms of socialism. Hitler, a more fascist form, though they're supposedly on different ends of the spectrum, National Socialists, the Nazis. And then Hitler wanted to have somebody kidnap and kill H.G. Wells. So, like you said, there's competing factions. But to go ahead.
Well, I mean, you know, that's what, you know, when I said their bottom line is American empire, and that's what led them into alliances. You know, we were talking before the break about their role in sort of whitewashing the records of former Nazis. One was a guy named Herman J. Abs, who was vice president of their German operation after the war, became known as the Wizard of the West German Miracle, brilliant financier until it was discovered that before he was Germany's banker, he was the man known as Hitler's banker. He, in fact, had helped spirit away untold amounts of German money to the Nazis who escaped to South America. And he was
so we have a Nazi connection with money coming over? Because we know the Bushes with Prescott have that connection.
Well, there's more than that. The head of their Swiss operation after the war was a banker named Alfred Herz, who used the family and its access to American politicians to come over and lobby for America to lay off all the money that, of course, they had stolen from the Swiss banks, had stolen from the Jews who had been killed, and you know, the so-called Nazi gold. You know, we forget that there were actually early attempts to investigate that stuff, and Alfred Herz, working through congressmen like Senator Alexander Wiley from Wisconsin and others, was able to lobby successfully using this group's network. That's really what this group is.
Wait a minute. This is the group that blocked the investigation of the rat line and the gold and diamonds?
I said they were a group. You know, I think you made an important point. There's no single group controlling all this stuff, but there's lots of different power bases in Washington.
It's like a swarm of viruses or something. It's a whole bunch of them, but going in the same direction, more power, more control. Specifically, let's get more into that history, but can you backtrack? Because I read your articles years ago in Harper's and Rolling Stone, because I remember just reading this and then going and Googling some of it and finding that, you know, you were telling the truth because it was so shocking about their philosophy. And we don't care about abortion. Jesus wants power. We don't care about, you know, this and that. We like Machiavelli. I mean, this sounds like a psycho cult masquerading as Christians.
Well, let me give you a quote. This is from the news, and we had in that lead-in, we had Congressman Todd Thehart talking about abortion. It's not that they don't care about those issues. The group tends to be pretty right-wing conservative, so they care. This is not their bottom line. Their bottom line is American empire. But one time I was at the C Street House. This is the house in Washington where they're providing below-market housing for congressmen, Republicans and Democrats, by the way. This is a bipartisan thing. This was bipartisan power lust, you might say. And I was there, and Doug Coe, the leader of the group, was counseling Congressman Todd Thehart. And Todd Thehart had come in. Todd Thehart is not what you would call an enlightened man. He said he was concerned that the Christian was losing the race with the Muslim. And, you know, he said, what is this guy talking about? This is crazy. What he meant was, he said that Muslims are having too many babies while Christians are not having enough. So it turns out Thehart represents himself as an ardent foe of abortion. What he means is abortion for Christians. He doesn't care if Muslims have abortions. In fact, he would like that. Well, now, Doug Coe, listening to this, says, okay, yeah, I hear you talking about this abortion issue. You know, I sort of agree with you on that, and that's fine. But I want you to think bigger. See, what I want you to do is to think in terms of a covenant. And he describes a covenant as something that men or of power enter into secretly, privately. He calls it a publicly invisible but privately identifiable group of companions. That's in their official documents. It's a covenant. He says, with a covenant, you can do so much more. He says, think of men who had a covenant. He says, think of the mafia. And then I'm just direct quoting here. Here's his examples of where he looks for his leadership lessons. Hitler, Pol Pot, Osama bin Laden, and Lenin. So all we can see here is that he was an equal opportunity admirer of killers.
Good Lord. But again, when you're saying all of this, I'm thinking about the Straussian economists and philosophers. I'm thinking about the Chicago School, the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers similarly funded other schools of thought. Do you ever run into Rockefeller foundations or Rockefeller money in all this?
Yeah, Rockefeller, and there may be more, but in the early days of the family, the Rockefeller Foundation, of course, has gone through a lot of different incarnations. At one point it was essentially almost a front for CIA money, and that's been documented pretty well.
And it founded modern eugenics.
Yeah. In the early days, they were indeed giving the family, which was then known as International Christian Leadership. They changed their name every few years. They say to avoid scrutiny, basically. But he gave some money to them to get started. I mean, you really see all the titans of American commerce. Because
you always have the Rockefellers. I mean, discovering cancer viruses, Rockefellers. Setting up just the whole system was set up by these people. I didn't know that. You're the expert. Of course, they're involved. It's kind of like you lift up a stone, and that's where you find the bugs. But look, other key points. I'm interrupting. This just gets more insane.
Sure.
Is their power getting greater? Is it waning? Do you get threats? What is it like?
This is almost maybe the comic section of the book, because I'd first written about this in Harper. So in chapter 9 of the book, The Family, I talked about some of the early reactions. One was his speaking engagement in Germany. Get over there. Turns out the whole speaking series is paid for by the U.S. Embassy. Get off the plane. My German host says, there's a problem. Your ambassador says that he cannot pay for you because you are an enemy of Jesus. And I said, this is the ambassador of the United States is saying this kind of thing. Who is it? It's a guy named Senator Dan Coates. Not the brightest bulb on the porch. He considers Dan Quayle his mentor. A guy so off the charts that when Bush proposed him for Secretary of Defense, Cheney vetoed him as too fanatical. That's that kind of guy. But even one of the odder responses was a phone call I get from one day from a guy who's an executive for the oil company, Pride Former, a very big international company involved in this stuff. He's calling me from Angola. Says he's just a fan of my work. That great. Call from Angola from a fan of my work. As we talk for a good long while, it turns out he's a member of the family. He's actually trying to recruit me back into it. So I try and get some counter-arguments. I said, what about the family's involvement in Indonesia? And the dictator Suharto killed 1.2 million of his own people. And his only counter-argument is that must be what God wanted for Indonesia. 1.2 million people dead. That was God's will.
The truth is, they're playing God. That's what this whole power trip's about.
Yeah, it was very well put to me by, I did an interview with someone from the Cato Institute, which is a very conservative think tank in Washington, and they really believe in free markets, and so I thought they weren't going to like the book, but they looked at it and they said, these guys aren't talking about free markets. There's nothing free about it. This is crony capitalism. The phrase they used I thought was really just dead on was self-interest by proxy. These guys get together in a small group. That's what a prayer cell is. That's what Senator Ensign, who we've been hearing about, Governor Stanford, those guys, Senator Coburn, they get together in a prayer cell. They don't actually read the Bible. I've been there for these things. They don't actually study the Bible. One man will say, I have a message from Jesus. I think Jesus gave me a message for you. And in the case of Senator Ensign and Coburn, the message seemed to be pay your mistress some hush money to keep yourself out of the public eye. But, the one thing that's really important about that whole scandal, and you mentioned talking about it on Maddow and so on, and focused on the sex scandals of Republicans, the more important thing is I don't care about their sex scandals.
Exactly. The question is, I don't want you to get in a fight with Maddow, but why does the media always make it left or right?
Maddow is one of the very few people pushing the story. I mean, this story has been around for a while, and every now and then someone makes an attempt. The Los Angeles Times did a year-long investigation, 2002, published their results, incredible stuff, linking the family to Central American death squads, all kinds of stuff, waited for the Pulitzer. The Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter did it. Not a peep. Last year, I did a segment with NBC Nightly News with Andrea Mitchell hosting, and we had Hillary Clinton talking about her involvement. We had video of Doug Coe talking about the great leadership example of the fellowship that he tries to promote is like that one enjoyed by Hitler, Himmler, and Goering. And, NBC thought they had the scoop of the campaign season. Not a peep, because our American political press They're religiously illiterate. They don't know the questions to ask. And,
Yeah, but Hitler was a freak. I mean, why this obsession with Hitler?
It's the most extreme. I mean, in some ways, it's sort of, it is very literally idiotic. It's at one point I asked someone that when I was living with us, guys, I said, I find this very troubling. They said, well, it's not his ends that we're interested in. It's his methods. And you're just blown away by that. But even that, they
but somebody's behavior is the manifestation of who they are.
Exactly. Well, and Hitler's methods were absolutely horrific. But they misunderstand those. They like to talk about, they say, look, here's what Hitler did. Hitler got together with a little group of friends in the back of a Bavarian beer hall, and working together,